Programming Gyan, Episode 1. Prefer const and inline over hash-defined macro. This is Dheeraj, your host and host. I was recently reviewing a legacy code base and I found that developers used lots of hash-defined macros, almost for all the constant, integer and strings and etc. This came in my mind that why someone would have used these many hash-defined macros. I think this is coming from C language, when there was no const variable to define your constants. Using hash define is fine, your compiler will not complain for this, but there are lots of issues in using hash defines. We'll discuss and we'll see what are those. When you define any constant value using hash defined macro, that name may never be seen by your compiler. Your preprocessor will remove that symbol before the code reaches to your compiler, and your name will never get entered into your symbol table. Let's say you are defining hash defined value underscore pi 3.14, that is a value of pi. Assume there is some error and error message referring to this number 3.14. If you don't know that this is defined in some header, which maybe you haven't created that header, you would waste lots of time tracking it down. So the best way to avoid this issue is replace your hash defined macro with constant variable const double value underscore pi equals to 3.14. Now value underscore pi is definitely seen by your compiler and will get one entry in your symbol table. There is another benefit of using constant also. Your object size will be smaller. Your preprocessor replaces the value underscore pi with 3.14 everywhere, which could result in multiple copies of 3.14 in your object code. But const value underscore pi will never use more than one copy. Another benefit of using constant variable is that you can define a class constant. To make it constant for all the objects, you should make it static. There is no way to create a class specific hash defined macro. Hash defined macro don't respect the limits or scopes. This is one disadvantage of hash define, and because you can't use hash define in class scope, you cannot make them as private. You cannot apply any encapsulation on that. There is a big issue, rather I say misuse people do. Developers define some macros that looks like a function. There is a benefit of doing this, that it saves the overhead of function calls, but there are so many problems with macros, these kind of macros especially. Whenever you write a function like macros, you will have to take care of parenthesize all the arguments in the macro body. If you miss to do that, you may get into trouble. Seriously, if someone calls this macro with an expression, oh, God bless you. Oh, why to go into these mess when you have a better tool? You can create an inline template function. Benefit is that this gives you all the features of macros, and in addition to that, it gives you type safety, which a regular functions gives you. Other than these, macros are hard to debug because your debugger will not know where to break, where to stop, so it will not break in anywhere. Your breakpoint will not hit. Why to go in all those things when you have tools to write a clean code? So at the end, my advice is use const objects over hash defined macros, and replace your function like macros with inline function. There are some limitations with inline which maybe we'll discuss in future episode. Try this in your code and share your experience with me on LinkedIn with hashtag Let's learn something today. You can tag me in your post and I will be happy. You can subscribe to this podcast and follow me on LinkedIn, Instagram and Twitter. I will give my social media links in description. You can listen to more episodes at www.jhadheeraj.com/podcast. You can read more blogs on my website www.jhadheeraj.com. Thank you for listening.